and I was suddenly aware that I was standing on my own outside in the middle of the night on the edge of the woods, looking
Yeah.
at UFOs in
I
the
was
sky.
just,
And it was like, this is actually one of the hardest things to explain, why it was such a powerful experience. It was as if I was in the presence of something so profound and so enormous that it was infinite, that I was in infinite white space. And I literally immediately opened my eyes. Now there was no altered state of consciousness. I sat down, I closed my eyes, bang.
mm,
It was instant illumination. And I would say, hands down, of everything I've experienced over the last 35 years, it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. Okay.
so here we are again. Welcome back. This is episode 4 with Freya. Sorry, just jogged the table just to start off. Well done, me. We've covered 3 episodes so far. Very interesting stuff. If you're new to us and you haven't been here before, do go back and start at the beginning. It's sort of chronological and will make more sense, especially as we dive deeper, which we are going to be doing today. Freya, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. As usual,
Good.
we fight through our technical difficulties to even
We
have
are
a
here.
simple conversation.
Yes,
Uh,
some hours later, and we're already here,
we're ready to begin.
ready
Uh,
to begin.
yeah, we're ready to begin.
Yes,
And we're trying to remember where we left off, which is hard because the last conversation was about losing chronological
losing
time,
it, which is
uh,
ironic.
which is ironic. Uh, yeah, and part of the paradox of the whole journey, that we're even trying to remember, or that I'm even trying to remember a story from the past, things that happened in the past when chronological time is lost. But we won't go back into that now. All we're trying to do right now, for anyone that's listening, is to get through this story, or to at least catch up to where I am now, in 2023 with the story, and then I'll be able to go back in and kind of pull out particular themes and things that actually happened in at different times throughout the story, that have relevance in themselves, have a kind of uh, something to say in themselves. So at the moment we're just trying to push through and get to the end of the
Yeah,
story,
yeah.
because
So you may touch on topics later in
yeah,
maybe separate
topics.
videos just to sort of pull things together.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're
exactly. Yeah.
2023 now. Where are we in the story?
Okay, so in the story now we're back. I'd say we're 1999 or 2000. I can't be specific. I can't be.
Okay, around then. And where are you living at this time?
I'm living in Bath. I was living
You're in
in
Bath.
Lark Hall in Bath,
Okay.
and I had left my job to become a sculptor after the
Yep,
Brancusi exhibition,
that's it.
and I'd had some extraordinary dreams. I'd been to Mexico. I'd had a
Yep,
man come to my house from my dream,
yep,
who was also linked to Mexico.
yep.
I'd also been
Was
to
it
Egypt. I've been to Egypt, to see, and the purpose of those two journeys was to simply to be at the pyramids, and I think to make a connection between the fact that uh, the Mexican pyramids and the Egyptian pyramids were not necessarily as separate as we're led to believe they are. And each of those journeys had been without pain, even though the rest of the time I had been in extreme pain.
Yes.
And yeah, and so I'd started to make sculpture, uh, even though I couldn't leave the house and I was in a lot of pain. Um, and then I'd had this sudden experience where I'd asked myself a question, which is in the previous conversation, that had really just kind of literally blown my mind, and made me understand that time was not passing. It made me
Hmm.
see and experienced that time was not passing, whereas before it clearly was, because that was the belief that we all lived by, and suddenly that belief was shattered, which creates a paradox, because you're living by linear time but you're not experiencing it passing, if you see what I mean. Yeah, so I'd managed to make a couple of sculptures, and those sculptures were made of wood, and there were abstract sculptures of visions that I'd had really whilst I was in pain, of my soul, which I knew at the time they were my soul in different configurations, but it was basically this kind of egg-shaped object that I saw, and it had a part of it that was separated and blackened. And when I made that sculpture, I used a blowtorch to char that part of the sculpture black, and it was separated but sitting on the top of the sculpture. And I'll maybe be able to include some pictures of that. But
Yes. I
met somebody who was an art teacher, and she saw my sculptures, and she said to me that had I ever heard of a sculptor called David Nash? And at the time I hadn't. And she said, oh, he works in wood as well, and he does a lot of charring of wood. And you should take a look at his work, and he's actually very open to people coming and visiting him. And he works up in a chapel, a big converted chapel up in a place called Blaenau Festiniog in North Wales.
Yeah.
And so I did look at his work, and I loved it. And it was kind of like mine, but an awful lot better and an awful lot bigger. And yeah, I just loved. I felt a real affinity with him and the work that he was doing. And I actually wrote to him, and I talked to him about the epiphany that I'd had that had made me leave my job to become a sculptor. And I say to become a sculptor, I don't actually think that that's what I was doing. I left my job in order to follow the clue, if you like, that Brancusi had given me, that sculpture offered. I never really wanted to be a sculptor. Do you know what I mean? But I made sculpture. There is a difference, and there's a difference in this story that I'll kind of explain more as we go along. But yeah, so I told him about the Brancusi exhibition and how it had affected me so profoundly that it had really changed my life. And he wrote back to me pretty quickly. Now, David he's a world-renowned, award-winning sculptor. He's I'd say probably one of the most important sculptors in the world alive today. And yeah, he wrote me this little handwritten note back saying, that he had also been prompted to become a sculptor by Brancusi. So we had this kind of connection. Really? Yeah, and he even drew a little drawing of Brancusi's egg head sculpture, which had been the one that had affected me so bad, so strong. Wow. And he drew it, and I still have that note now. And actually, with a lot of the Myth of Reality videos, there is on the little thumbnails that I use on the video, you can actually see the Brancusi head sculpture in the background there. Yeah.
So even this is more synchronicity, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, the synchronicity. Totally. It just never stopped. I mean, once it had started, it just was. It was a cascade of synchronicity, really, one after another. And again, it's really important to say that I wasn't looking for it, and I didn't even know that there was such a thing as the evolution of consciousness, or a spiritual journey. I mean, a spiritual journey didn't mean anything to me. None of that meant anything to me. I was just following what happened. I was responding partly because I was kind of trapped. I was looking for clues, and Brancusi had been a big clue to me. Yeah, so David actually asked me. He said he was installing an exhibition up, I think it was in Yorkshire now, in a big barn up in Yorkshire, and he asked me if I wanted to go and help him install it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I really wanted to meet him, so I went up there, and we got on so well as soon as we met each other. And he had been due to be interviewed for some documentary or something, and the people couldn't make it. They couldn't get there. So he actually asked me to do the interview. Now, bearing in mind I knew pretty much nothing about him or his work, it was a pretty good interview, really. We just seemed to know each other. We just seemed to have a
Yeah.
rapport. We got on really well. Anyway, about I had on my fridge in Bath a card that I'd picked up from somewhere, and it was a card of a little stone cottage in a forest, and it was a self-catering cottage, and I'd kept it for ages, thinking one day I'm going to go to that cottage. Anyway, so I decided to book this cottage, and it was owned by a woman who was an artist, and her husband, who was a philosopher and a writer, and they owned a big area of land. And this was an old, it was actually an old kennels for the hunting hounds, the hunting dogs from the big estate that they had converted into this lovely off-grid cottage in the woods, deep in the forest, really, down a gated track, about 2 miles into the forest. And anyway, I booked it to go on holiday for a week. And when I got up there, it suddenly dawned on me that I was very close to Blaenau Ffestiniog. I wasn't far from David, and so I called him while I was there, and he said, "Why don't you come round and have a chat?" Which I did, and then it transpired that there was a studio there as well with this cottage, and they just finished converting it, and they wanted to rent it. And so I decided that I was going to rent the place over the winter and just stay there and make sculpture. And when David discovered that, he asked me if I wanted to assist him. So I basically, went from knowing nothing about sculpture and knowing no one in the world of sculpture. Within a couple of months, I was assistant to David Nash.
Amazing.
And living in the woods in this incredible little cottage. Anyway, so I'd been there, I mean, I don't know, a couple of months maybe. And one evening I was lying on the floor talking to a friend on the phone, and I saw this light shoot across the window, and I said, "Oh, I've just seen a shooting star." And then I kind of thought about it, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm a bit disorientated because I'm lying on the floor. Aren't shooting stars meant to go down, rather than up? And so I just said, "Oh, I'll call you back. I'm just going to go and have a look outside." So bearing in mind, I'm in a very isolated place on my own in the woods, surrounded by a huge forest in Snowdonia. And I open the door and I walk down the path kind of into the edge of the woods, and I look up in the sky, and there is a number of lights in the sky, and they're all static in a particular geometric formation. And then they start to move, all maintaining this perfect geometric symmetry. And I don't know how long I was out there just watching these lights in the sky. And it was as if I was, transfixed, really. I wasn't aware where I was or what I was doing or whatever. And then suddenly it was like my consciousness just flipped, and I was suddenly aware that I was standing on my own outside in the middle of the night on the edge of the woods, looking
Yeah.
at UFOs in the sky. And it was like, a sudden, oh my God, sudden, like a snap. I snapped out of it and went back into the house.
Wow.
And I was like, what on earth just happened? And I called,
Mm.
there were another couple of friends who lived around the hillside who were both artists as well. And I'd met them since I'd been living there. And I called them and I said, can you see these lights in the sky? And they couldn't actually see them from where they were. They said no. But actually, they did say that there was a woman who lived down by the lake, down below where we were. And she had been seeing them for many years and interacting with them for many years. And no, I never pursued that. I don't think I ever went and no, I didn't ever go and speak to her about it. But anyway, so that happened. And then a couple of days afterwards, I had this really strong compulsion to meditate. Now, I hadn't done meditation. I wasn't good at meditation. I had been on a little mindfulness, weekend course before, but I didn't do meditation at all. But the compulsion to do it was really, really strong. And I sat down, and the instant that I closed my eyes, it was like this extraordinarily bright floodlight was turned on, and I was just this is actually one of the hardest things to explain, why it was such a powerful experience. It was as if I was in the presence of something so profound and so enormous that it was infinite, that I was in infinite white space. And I literally immediately opened my eyes. Now, there was no altered state of consciousness. I sat down, I closed my eyes, bang. It was instant illumination. And I would say, hands down, of everything I've experienced over the last 35 years, it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. And even speaking about it now, I can feel the anxiety of how overwhelming it was. And I tried maybe 3 or 4 times. The compulsion to close my eyes and to meditate was still really strong, even though it was frightening. I was still really compelled to do it. And I think I managed to hold it maybe for 3 seconds, would have been like the longest of all the tries that I could experience it for. And each time it was absolutely terrifying. And
really? What was terrifying? So it wasn't like a divine light when you say it was terrifying.
I think it was a divine light. Yeah, I think.
So when you say it was terrifying, you mean it was humbling, sort of? Do you mean that sort of
No,
feeling?
it was simply terrifying. It was simply terrifying.
Scary.
Yeah,
scary.
Terrifying. Yeah, it was. If I try and interpret it now, why was it so frightening? It's not something I've ever really thought about. I think it's because we, in human form, everything is to human scale. If you think about it, if you go out and you go for a walk, the grass comes up to your ankles. The trees are tall enough to climb. They don't have trunks that are 100 meters across. When you're in your house, it's built to human scale and it has form.
You can make sense of it.
You can make sense of it. You're always slightly contained by your environment. You have a point of reference that says, here I am, here's the tree, here I am, here's the garden, here I am, here's the kitchen. You somehow know where you are because you're always in some sort of context that is human scale, and if you think about it, when do we experience the most awe? It was awe flipped into, it was extreme awe that flipped into terror, actually. And I think
they're almost like the true sense of the word almighty.
Yeah, I suppose maybe. Yeah, almighty. If you go to a cathedral or something and you look around, you're in awe. That sense of a profound sense that there is something great about the space, whether you're religious or not. Very few people go into a great cathedral or any great building or see any great monument and don't think, wow, there is something extraordinary about this. There is something
all-encompassing sort of feeling. Yeah.
And as we go through this story, we'll realize why that is, that actually, the original dream that I had that taught me that there is a mathematical perfection to reality that we're too close to see. Part of the reason for that is that when you experience that perfection, when you can really take it in, we're not meant to take it all in at once. We're only meant to be exposed to small amounts of it because that's kind of containable. That there is mathematical perfection embedded in the architecture of these great structures and these great buildings, which is really what the awe is about. The presence of perfection, the presence of being closer to perfection, closer to source, God, whatever you want to call it, something, a creator, something which is the source of that mathematical perfection, which we're only now beginning to recover again. But yeah, when you say about divine light, I mean, I've described it as divine light myself, and it's not a it's not a conflict to say that whatever that was, to say that it was divine in nature. I believe it was divine in nature, just like the experience of love was divine in nature that I experienced years earlier. And to say it created fear. If you look into any biblical encounter even with angels or whatever, whatever it is, there is fear, there is terror. It's not.
They always say fear not, don't they?
Yeah, yes. Fear not. You have to be calmed down. You have to be kind of quietened down and kind of told that it's okay because it's an extraordinary experience. Now, the question is, did that happen because of the lights in the sky? Now, I can't prove that it did, but my journey to date now, another 25 odd years on top of that, would suggest to me that, yeah, it was connected to the lights in the sky. What were the lights in the sky? I can't categorically say. I used the word UFO. They were unidentified. They were flying. They were lights. Whether they were objects or not, I couldn't say. The terminology that we have for all of these things is very limited and very clumsy. And I think part of the reason for telling this story is to try and kind of gel together a lot of these seemingly disparate experiences into something meaningful and something that is about a revelation of truth that we've seen bits and pieces of in our history. But because of the way our consciousness has been contracted and everything has become compartmentalized and separated, that it's quite difficult for anybody to kind of go, well, actually, what if all these extraordinary experiences are all part of one truth, one deeper level of reality that we've, as our consciousness has fallen and our senses have become limited, and we've become very left-brained and rational and logical, and we've said, well, you know, that's that bit of the story, and that's that bit of the story, and they're not connected. That what I've done really in this journey, or what's been done to me, really, I'd say, or through me, is a lived experience, which is reconnecting all these seemingly disparate parts of you know, what you might call, you know, the paranormal, the beyond normal. That's what it's been called in recent times, because it just doesn't fit with our rational, logical, physically biased, you know, version of reality. But that's now.
And at this stage, were you starting to connect those dots at all, or did that come later?
No, I really wasn't. The weird thing about it, I think after I lost linear time, particularly, and by that I mean it was no longer my predominant way of thinking. It didn't mean to say that I didn't think tomorrow was going to happen. I did. I did think there was going to be an experience that I would have in the moment we call tomorrow. I could still make arrangements. I could still refer back, but I wasn't preoccupied with looking back through a timeline to try and work out what was happening to me. And I never have been since, really. I mean, I can talk about this now, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy to, you know, to go back into the past to pull this story together. I mean, it is actually quite a physical effort. It's a physical strain to bring this story together. And I think it's, you know, it's partly because it is so complex and it is so, you know, interdimensional, that the only way to actually survive the amount of synchronicities and experiences that I've had is to not dwell and to not have access to it all the time, which I don't. You know, my mind is predominantly empty. So, which is, you know, it's a huge relief, because, you know, you would go crazy if you spent your entire time trying to pull all this together, because it's beyond comprehension still. It's certainly beyond ordinary terminology and language and the definitions of terminology that we've come to accept as true. You know, when I say the word UFO, I mean, the majority of minds will go to a spaceship with little green men. Still, you know, that's not what I believe was in the sky. That's not what was happening. But to begin to even begin to unpick that little tiny piece of the story right now, it's not really possible. You need to follow this story further to understand what I think was in the sky, why I think that triggered that access to something far, far greater than we are supposed to be allowed to experience for our own good. Whatever that blinding light was, it was a big part of my evolution of consciousness. It was a trigger, I think, to, you know, events that happened over the preceding years, including the, you know, Enlightenment experience, and the walk-in experience, you know, which is we're all yet to talk about.
Was there anything else with that meditation that you had with the blinding lights, or was it just that experience and then
no
over?
I mean, I didn't even do a meditation. I didn't get that far into it. I mean, it was literally
just came away from it.
Bang, you know, whether that was 3 seconds or it was long, I have no idea.
No.
That's the memory, that I never was able to sit and meditate, because it was like the second my eyes were shut, this boom, beaming bright light and it wasn't just light. It was a little bit referring back to the dream, where I was in this space with all these balls hanging from the metal balls
Yeah.
hanging from the grid, where I was shown the mathematical perfection of reality. It was the same thing. It's like an infinite space. It's like there's no edge to it. You're not in a room. You're not in a landscape. You're free floating, and it's a very unnerving experience. It's a very I mean, again, I'm lost for words really to try and explain why it would be so.
Like what you imagine a black hole experience would be, if I know you can't in a way, but that sort of feeling of nothing forever.
Yeah, nothing, but it wasn't nothing. It was something. It was
something,
definitely something. It was white, like a white hole, like a. It was everything. It was. I don't want to try and add too much to it because, I want to try and, describe it as it actually happened and how I felt about it then, how I feel about it now. I'm kind of surprised at how the kind of sense of awe and terror are still kind of hanging around now in describing it. But yeah, I think it was a trigger, like the Groundhog Day dream unlocked something. This unlocked something. It seems that over time, for some reason, I have been affected by things that have come to me beyond our normal understanding of reality, beyond our normal consciousness, that have impacted on my understanding and my experience of reality, that have allowed me to put bits and pieces of our deeper reality together into some sort of cohesive narrative that is helping me to assist people in this tipping point that we're at in consciousness, this tipping point that humanity is at, this great awakening of consciousness that's occurring now. It was all done for a reason.
With anything else, or should we...
Yeah, I mean, it has all happened for a reason, and it has all happened to this end for this time. And as we said right at the beginning of having these conversations, this isn't about me telling my story for my sake. It's about me telling this story to see if it is beneficial to other people that are going through transformation at this time, which I believe we all are. I think that my journey is a fractal of the awakening of consciousness, which is happening for all of humanity. It's available for all of humanity now. Whether all of humanity is ready for it or willing to take it or able to take it, to take that leap, I don't know. But I do know that I think if I have had some sort of it's a huge hailstorm happening now. If I had some sort of map, some sort of guide, that it might have helped me in my experience along the way. It and and it's not even as if you can get this guidance within any spiritual tradition, because it cuts across so many things. It's not just religion. You've got you've got a deafening storm happening.
We can't hear it here at all.
Can't you? You can't. It's so loud here.
No, it's fine.
I mean, you've literally got the return of, that you've got the revelation from the Bible occurring, the end of times, the creation of a new earth. You've got enlightenment from Buddhism. You've got the Rosicrucian attempt to create a massive expansion and evolution of consciousness in the world. You've got the UFOs, other dimensional beings, crop circles. You know, I mean, it's endless, really. It's tying so many different things together that if I had been tied to any tradition, I would not have noticed and not been able, because I'd have had to exclude them or interpret them in a way which was biased to the beliefs within the tradition that I had chosen to enter into. And again, that becomes part of this story too. Why did I deliberately refuse to be trained in shamanism?
Yes.
Why did I deliberately refuse to accept the possibility that I was having a religious calling that would draw me into Christianity? I've already had two options given to me to enter into a tradition that would take me deeper into my experience and give it context and kind of, in a sense, give me community. And on both occasions, I said no. And
Does it make... Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. In some ways, when you're summing that up, it makes me feel like you're the observer rather than the participant. Would you say that's the case?
Well, I think I'm both. I think that's the that's the key.
I mean, I know quite a bit of your story still to come, you know, and that's it. I think you're almost like you're an all-seeing eye of this, you know, you're experiencing it, but also observing it from a distance. You're assessing it, but you're becoming it. It's almost like you're totally... it is your life, isn't it? It's taken... it's all of you. From what I know of you, everything is this experience that just keeps opening new layers to, you know, onion like, you know, just layers are peeled back.
Yeah, I mean, we entered into this conversation, you know, to have these interviews, to do these interviews, to record this story with the full awareness that you may not understand it, and with the full awareness that I may not be able to share it, that it may have got to the point... We're only in the early stages of this story.
Absolutely.
Still, I mean, people might find that hard to believe when we're just, you know, our fourth conversation, but you know, we're at the beginning where it is still quite linear.
Yeah.
You know, because like you say, at this point, I hadn't begun to join the dots. I hadn't begun to see that there was any connection between these extraordinary experiences. I was still just having one experience, and I was still just trying to get myself back on my feet because I'd been so unwell and so in, you know, so much physical pain for so long. I was just coming out of that, really. And actually, ironically, I was just about to go back into it as well. You know, that was all about... there was a whole other level of sickness that was about to kind of, you know, become a teacher for me as well, which is what I believe. I believe that art, sculpture was a guru for me. I believe that pain has always been my main teacher. Pain was my main guru. And because I had these gurus, I didn't need to be confined or placed into any kind of you know, student teacher dynamic in any tradition or any you know, religious or spiritual path. And I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't looking for a spiritual path. You know, like I say, the limit of my spirituality was a one weekend mindfulness, you know, meditation kind of weekend. That was it. That was it. You know, stress management when I was working. I had begun to understand that we create our reality with our consciousness. That had just begun to come through. I knew that there was a thing called Christ consciousness had come into my mind. I didn't know what it meant. I knew that the Mayan civilization was important. I knew that the pyramids were important. I knew, because of the teaching I'd had through that dream and the man that came to my house from the dream, that there was a mathematical pattern a perfection in reality that I couldn't see because I was too close to it, and that my suffering was being caused by that. I now believe our collective suffering is being caused by that. Again, that's the fractal. What I was being taught is what we are all being taught now, you know. But no, I wasn't
You see,
joining the dots then.
no, you've just been given pieces, just disparate
Yeah,
pieces almost. Not completely disparate, but pieces that didn't make sense necessarily.
pieces that didn't make sense, pieces that were very profound, and in a sense so profound they couldn't be shared.
You weren't telling anybody about this stuff.
Oh well, I was telling people, but I would, in a very dismissive kind of way, like I might have said, "Oh yeah, I tried to meditate, but there was this really weird white light happened when I did," and that would be it. You know, it wouldn't be.
Yeah. People are like, wow, really? Wow.
Yeah, but it didn't
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
anything. It wasn't.
no,
It was glossed over. You know, it was just one of those things that happened, and I saw the lights in the sky, and obviously I'd phoned my friends to see if they could see it, so they knew I was seeing something.
yes,
And the fact that she'd mentioned that there was somebody down by the lake who'd also been seeing them. But again, I didn't pursue it. I could have easily gone down and seen that woman and asked her
yeah.
what she'd seen, and I
Thinking about
didn't.
that.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think one of the most important elements for me in my story is that I know with absolute certainty I wasn't looking for it, which means that I wasn't learning anything that could happen and then making it happen because I wanted it to.
Mm.
I wasn't involved in any spiritual tradition or any spiritual path. And so I wasn't being guided towards anything. But there were things that I just knew. It was like I was increasingly knowing of things that I had no reason to know, because I hadn't learnt them or been taught them or seen them anywhere externally. They were coming from within me. There was knowings, truth.
Yes, and you weren't looking for anyone else's input or advice or anything.
There was no one to get it from. I mean, I didn't know anybody
No,
that was spiritual. I didn't know anybody that
yeah,
was religious. You know, the only person I knew, I had one friend who was a born again Christian who I knew fairly vaguely when I lived back in Cheltenham, when I'd had the experience of the unconditional love, waking up in unconditional love. And I asked her about it, but it was, you know, it didn't mean anything to her.
no.
Um,
So you had a sense of it coming from within.
no, I didn't have a sense of it coming from within.
Not even then.
I felt like it was happening to me. I felt like,
To
you know, yeah, I mean, the man, it was very external in many ways. The lights were out there in the sky. The man
Yeah,
knocked on my door and came into my
yeah,
house. You know, I was lying fully conscious when I heard the cacophony of, you know, birds and animals while I was having
yeah.
the shamanic experience. It was actually happening. You know,
You were being subjected to these things.
things were happening to me, and it was as if I was being guided as to how to deal with them, which was really to just don't talk about it. You know, just don't
Okay,
worry about it. You don't need to understand it. It's what's happening, and
okay,
it's been that way the whole way along. I tend to get retrospective validation or retrospective insight into what has already happened.
okay.
And that for me has been important because, as I say, it's meant that I know with certainty I didn't create it from my imagination or from my desire. That something has happened, and then you know, a little while later, someone will come along or someone will lend me a book or something, and it will explain to me what's just happened to me.
Yes,
And that is really the way it's always been. So the question is, what is guiding me? What is creating these experiences? What were the lights in the sky? Where did the experience of love come from? Who was the man from the dream? Why did I have that particular dream? What was the light that I was experiencing? Why was it so terrifying? What did it do to me? What did the Groundhog Day do to me? They all loosened my engagement, not engagement, my grasping of three-dimensional reality being all there is, the surface being all there is. I think that I had to accept, as these things were happening to me, that there was more to reality than I had grown up imagining there was, or being taught that there was. Because if I didn't accept that, I would have to be in denial of my own experience. And I think that would have driven me mad, to hold these experiences in as if they didn't happen would have, would have created huge suffering. And so it wasn't that I didn't share them, but there was no way of explaining them. They just were happening. And I suppose I never expected anything else to happen. After each one, I thought, oh, well, that was weird. But I never thought something else would happen. I didn't realize this was going to be 25 years of, of experiential dot joining. That's what this is.
Yes.
Not reading about it on the internet, or watching videos about it on YouTube and kind of going, or watching Netflix, fictions which tell us there are other dimensions and other, which people are all doing now, all the time. This was happening way back at a time where I didn't have a single book in my house, nor had I ever read a single book about consciousness. The only even slightly strange films I'd ever seen were Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Groundhog Day. I think I watched Groundhog Day, but I don't even, to be honest, I'm not even sure if Groundhog Day, the film, was out when I'll have to look that up. I don't know whether it actually came out after I had my experience. I'm not sure. So it was all very isolated. All of the experiences were isolated from any external influences that might have caused me to imagine them or will them into experience. And so
which gives it all so much authenticity.
Well, yeah, I mean, whether it was important to me. That became very important to me. And again, as we go forward, you'll understand that there was actually a very profound experience I had that reinforced that was important, that had always been important, and it was meant to happen this way. That I was meant to refuse to be trained as a shaman, that I was meant to refuse to go into the church and see that my, the waking up in unconditional love was a religious calling. I was meant to stay independent. I was meant to be able to join many more dots than I would have been able to if I had taken any of those paths, because however expanded any of them may be, they are limited by their containment, because they're all coming from the past. They're all coming from somewhere that has been defined in the past. And what I'm doing now is putting these, how does shamanism actually connect with Christianity? How do ancient sites connect with shamanism and Christianity? And it's not just those things, it's just the ones we're talking about now. It's how does it all fit together? How does this extraordinary deeper level of our reality that's been hidden from us simply because we're in a part of the cycle of consciousness which is in contraction and has been in contraction for a very long time and is now beginning to open up again. Just natural. It's nothing's been done to us. We haven't been harmed. This hasn't happened to us. It's happened because this is the path that consciousness takes. It contracts and it expands, and that's it. There is a breath to life. And that we're at the end of a great cycle of contraction, which has caused us to have a very limited ability to perceive our reality. And it is now expanding and opening up. And as it expands and opens up, we see the connectivity between all things, which is that mathematical perfection I was taught. And as we perceive it and we're able to accept it internally, we actually begin to experience it externally, because our external reality is simply a mirror of our inner state of consciousness. So as that expands, so does our experience of reality, because they are ultimately one and the same.
And that is a great message of hope for humanity, to be fair, isn't it? You know,
all of this is intended as a
it's
great
all good. It's
message.
all good,
It
and
is.
it's all hopeful.
It is all hopeful because it is all a natural cycle. Spring is coming.
Yes.
We're at the end of winter. Spring is coming. Everything
Yes, and
is
you're not just
occurring.
talking about this year. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not just talking. I'm
No, I
talking
know. Just that
in
we
this
happen to be in
great
March.
cycle.
We're not
Yeah.
talking about that. Yeah.
And no, and
Freya.
I think it's really important as well to just end. It's really important that people understand that part of what I'm trying to share is that we can get to a point where we realize that everything that we perceive to be negative that's occurring at this time, and there is so much that people can be fearful of, or want to fight against, or to wish wasn't happening, or to see being done to us as a negative thing. It is perfectly possible, once we get this wider perception, to realize that all of that is absolutely necessary. That is an inevitable consequence of the fall of consciousness, and it is the rocket fuel that we need to propel us into this new earth, this new world that's being created. Nothing is wrong. It's all okay.
Beautiful, beautiful message. Thank you, Freya. Yet again, profound this time. Well, you always are, but particularly profound, I think, this time. We will continue the journey in our next episode, which will be episode 6 next time. No, episode 5 next time. So we've done 4 already. Yeah. So everybody catch up with where we've got to, so that you can follow this in real time as it gets loaded up for you. More to come next time. And all I can tell you is that this story just gets more and more and more profound. So thanks, Freya, once again for your wisdom and your thoughts, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.